Hey, folks, it's that time again. It's time again for another session of Get to Know Dynatrace. I'm your host, David Jones. Everyone calls me Jonesy, and welcome to what's likely going to be the final edition of Get to Know Dynatrace for 2024. It's been a amazing year. We've had so many great conversations, so many great sessions with Get to Know Dynatrace. You know what makes Get to Know Dynatrace so special? It's you, the audience, because we invite you to ask us questions as we're going through and letting you know about Dynatrace. As we do our demo, you ask questions and we take it from there. So, folks, as always with Get to Know Dynatrace, I like to start things off with a couple of segments and let's just get started. I'm going to share my screen here. And let's just get going. And there we go. Let's see. We got the presentation up. Hopefully, Chris and Megan, who are on hand right now, is everything looking good? Anyone hear me? We still going? All right. So let's get started. First off, the segment that we always start with every single time at Get to Know Dynatrace is what's new. So, what's new? Well, if you want to find out what's new here at Dynatrace, it's real easy. You go to dynatrace.com/news/blog, and that's where we post all of the information about what's new here at Dynatrace. So you can see that we've been busy over the past couple of months. We have been spending a lot of time getting ready for a lot of events that have been going on. Like, for example, we were at the AWS reInvent a couple of weeks ago. What a fabulous turnout. What an exciting show. If you visited us at our booth, thank you very much. I hope you had a chance to play with some of the great Lego that we had set up there. I understood, I wasn't there, but I understood that we had amazing conversations with folks. So this was, for us, just an example of how often and how much excitement we see in the industry around Dynatrace. We just had a constant stream of people through the booth. Lots of people asking us questions. And the reason people are always asking us questions is because Dynatrace is a very innovation focused company. And what do I mean by that? We are constantly adding new capabilities into our platform. We're constantly adding new things. For example, every 2 weeks, there is a new release into the Dynatrace SaaS platform. And so along with that are all of these new capabilities that we are constantly adding. I'm going to give you a hint on some of the ones that are coming down the pipe. So we're going to start changing things up here with Get to Know Dynatrace. Not only are we going to talk about what's new, but we're also going to start talking about what you should be looking forward to. So some other things here that you can see. We've got our release notes for these updates that we talked about. You can see that we're adding new capabilities around for things like compliance testing. There are other pieces of content here I totally recommend that you have a look at. Everything from automating an AWS well architected framework foundation, using our CloudFormation templates, to things like how to basically navigate end-to-end data compliance through effective log management. All sorts of different content that is, just fabulous place to go to find out what's new at Dynatrace and what's new and happening within the industry itself. Now, I mentioned before that what we're going to do is we're going to start changing things up. So this is, basically as part of this what's new segment, I also want to start talking about what's coming soon. Here's some capabilities that is soon to be released: security posture management. So here's a concept. You are out there building applications, releasing your own capabilities, but many of you, if you are in financial services, if you're in healthcare, if you are in a heavily regulated industry, often there are things that your application, requirements that your application has to comply with. And so now what Dynatrace is doing, in addition to all the great stuff that we do with observability, with log management, with business events and business analytics and real user monitoring, now what we're also going to be doing is we're going to be offering the security posture management capability so that we can go out and automatically analyze your application and tell you how compliant you are with different regulatory systems. Like, for example, if you are want to understand, how are you complying against certain NIST rules, or what's your DORA compliance like? In the past, most organizations that have to do this, they often do it in a very manual fashion, where they would go out and hire a third-party consultant to come in and analyze their application, run through the checklist. Now, what Dynatrace is doing is automating this so that you can attach this essentially to your application. And for example, if you're standing up a Kubernetes environment, now what we can do is we could go in and do an assessment automatically and tell you, in this particular case, what, based upon the specific standard, is there a rule that you may or may not comply with? And so we'll go out and we'll tell you which rules you're not currently complying with. But then what we'll also do is we're going to give you insights into how we detected that, as well as tips in terms of how you can remediate this. And so this is a perfect tool set that allows you to better make sure that your application is in compliance with those different industry standards that are out there. So this is coming soon. We are really excited about this. We work with a lot of financial institutions. We work with, a lot of regulated work within a lot of regulated industries like healthcare. This is critically important for those customers. So that's something that's coming down the pipe. Now, the other thing that I want to mention, that I always mention about this time of year, that's Dynatrace Perform. Perform 2025 in Las Vegas. We're going to be at the Aria Hotel, and we'll be doing this on site in person February 3rd through the 5th. Now, if you haven't registered, there is still time. Please, please, please register as soon as you can, because spaces fill up. And once those spaces fill up, we can't make any more room. So, take advantage of this as if you can. Come to Vegas to our Perform conference. We have a great lineup of content. We have our hands-on training days, which are always well attended. You have the opportunity to meet with like-minded individuals that are from other organizations out there in the world that are also using Dynatrace. It is very much about the Dynatrace community. So don't forget, if you haven't already done so, sign up for Perform 2025, February 3rd through 5th in Las Vegas. So let's move on to our next segment. Our next segment is Did You Know? Now, it's the holidays, so we're going to do something a little different. A little extra Christmas presents under the tree right now. And for this Did You Know, normally I pick one topic. Recently, I was in Dallas at a user group that we offered. And what we did was we changed things up a bit in terms of doing a sort of a Did You Know session. And so what I want to do is just talk a little bit about things that you may or may not be aware of that you currently have access to, as well as other things that you should be thinking about. So for this holiday edition, Did You Know? Did you know? And let's do it this way. Here are 5 Dynatrace capabilities that you should be using today. The very first one, logs and business events. If you weren't aware of this, Dynatrace has a very powerful log monitoring capability. So we can, with our DQL, this is our Dynatrace query language, we can basically effectively do what is called schema on read. So basically, we can, dynamically create queries without having to go back and re-index that data. This is a super powerful mechanism for people to utilize logs, because now, regardless as to whether or not I know what to ask and how to ask it, how to organize my data, I can just do it through one of these DQL queries without thinking about how do I want to index my data. What we can also now do is we can pull out information from logs and transactions. So in-flight transactions, we can look at the payloads and we can essentially generate what we call business events. By looking at the payload, this allows us to basically think of observability in a completely different way. Observability, your metrics, your traces, your logs, that's sort of the classic way that people think of things. Now I can actually look at the transactions. I can look at the business information that's being passed back and forth, and I can act on that. So this allows you to do so many different things. And it's actually going to be a theme moving forward, which is all of the different possibilities that Dynatrace opens up. Other things that you should be thinking about using today, if you're not, is our new Foundation and Discovery mode. Foundation and Discovery is a new mode that the agent, the Dynatrace One agent, can operate in. You're probably familiar with the Dynatrace agent that runs in, it's full stack mode. It runs in an infra mode where it's kind of like a reduced telemetry. It's not actually generating the traces from the application. But now there's also a new mode, which is this Foundation and Discovery mode, which allows you to run the Dynatrace One agent in a reduced telemetry fashion. It's pulling off very basic metrics. But the advantage of this is at any point in time, I can dial up. It's just like we have a volume knob, and we can dial it up to 11 if we need to go from Foundation and Discovery mode through infra mode to full stack mode. Just dial it up or down depending upon your needs. It's a very flexible way of being able to make sure that you've got the widest possible coverage with Dynatrace, but monitoring in a way that makes sense for your organization. Other things to take into account that you may not be aware of are notebook functionality. Being able to do exploratory queries and then build on top of these queries with these notebooks. AppSec, if you weren't aware of this, we also have these capabilities around being able to detect third-party vulnerabilities or do runtime attack blocking as well. These are capabilities that are built right into the One agent. You just flip a switch and you can turn these on. I was at a CISO event yesterday, and I was in a room with 20 CISOs, and we were talking about these types of topics. And it's so surprising how many organizations aren't even aware of the capabilities that they have when they're using something like the Dynatrace platform. And finally, the last component that you should be using today, if you're not aware of it, is our workflows. So when Dynatrace detects an issue, when it detects a problem, it detects a condition, when you're using one of our site reliability guardians, you can now trigger a workflow. These workflows can be chained together with other tools. So you can basically, create, if you want, complete self-healing routines. This is super exciting. If you're not familiar with the workflows, I highly invite you to take a look at it. Now, some of the things that you'll want to be using for tomorrow, and this is why I was saying it was a very different edition of Did You Know? And that is coming down the pipe. Things that you want to be on the look for is our developer observability capabilities, being able to actually set non-breaking breakpoints within a production application. That's what we're talking about. Developers are absolutely going to love these capabilities that are coming out within the platform. Other things that we're going to be providing is threat hunting and forensics, the ability for you to go out and actually use those DQL queries to really, fine tune and be much more precise when you're trying to detect a potential malicious actor. Other things that we just talked about would be that security compliance framework that we were just mentioning. The Davis Copilot. We're really excited about this because we feel that it's really going to democratize access to Dynatrace. You won't need to know how to do that DQL. You can just simply ask the Davis Copilot a question, and then eventually you'll get to a point where you'll have data-driven conversations with the Davis Copilot. And then also things that you should be on the look for are our costing frameworks. If you've seen our Carbon app, it's built on top of some logic that allows you not only to understand where, my applications might be, optimized from a carbon footprint point of view. You can use those same types of approaches when it comes to doing more FinOps type analysis of your applications and infrastructure. So that was this season's Did You Know? It's kind of a combination, some stuff that you may not have been aware of. Now, the next segment is brand new. We've not done this before. We're going to start doing more of these in the future, and that is the art of the possible with the Dynatrace platform. I want to walk you through a quick little story, and then we're going to get to the best part of Get to Know Dynatrace, which is, of course, our demo and our live interaction with you, the audience. But let's start here with the art of the possible. The art of the possible, in this particular case, here is an example. We have a blog article that we've written about this. It's just a fascinating idea. So we had some of our team, we're working with some airlines, and what we discovered was that aircraft, when they are communicating with the ground, they all are sending out a beacon or a signal across publicly accessible airwaves. And so there is technology that's available out there to allow you to basically consume those signals and turn it into information that you could then use, in this particular case, in Dynatrace dashboards. So how does this all work? And the way that it works is, first off, you need to be able to, in this case, actually get those signals. So here, what we did was we grabbed the Raspberry Pi, and then we grabbed, in this particular case, essentially a for lack of a better word, radio receiver that we plugged into the Raspberry Pi so that we could actually pick up those signals from the aircraft over the airwaves. This was then being analyzed by some, in this particular case, this is some software that's called essentially Dump 1090. This allows us to actually pull in those signals and be able to understand what's going on. We can take the output from this publicly available tool, this Dump 1090, and basically create JSON. Once we've got this content now from these airplanes, and you can see here that it's telling us information about the flight number, the current position, the altitude, the vertical climb rate, the track, the speed that they're going on. All of that information is being captured by that Dump 1090 software. It's being written out as a JSON. Now that it's JSON, we can actually consume JSON inside of Dynatrace, and we can parse it out as a business event. Once we're parsed it out as a business event, we can then, in this particular case here, you can see that we've now got the data laid out in a much more tabular format. Once we've got this, we can start taking this data and just using it to build out dashboards. Now, I mentioned this. Obviously, not everyone's airlines, but the concept of being able to take external telemetry from some source, being able to then transform that data and then be able to display it up into a dashboard, it didn't require any heavy engineering. In this particular case, all it required was us to be able to connect all the components together. So it wasn't like a lot of developer time sitting down and creating code. What we were doing was taking what's already available, parsing it in a way that we could then, basically display it in a meaningful fashion in a dashboard like this. This could just as easily be telemetry that's coming off of sensors that are on a conveyor belt, or in some other part of your manufacturing process, or maybe you've got a fleet of vehicles that are out in the wild doing things. There's all sorts of different ways that you can take this technique and apply it. And then once we've got this data, we can start applying things like, for example, those site reliability guardians and rules and SLOs to help trigger alerts or trigger workflows based upon what data that we're seeing. This just shows you that observability is so much more than just metrics, traces, and logs. There's so much more business relevant things that you can be doing with this information. For me, it's super exciting. Now, folks, let's get on to the best part of Get to Know Dynatrace. It's demo time. And this week, our guest engineer, someone new to Dynatrace, but we've known him for quite some time, and that's Chris Andre. Hey, Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Jonesy. How are you today?
I'm doing fabulous. Thank you very much for doing this demo today, this Get to Know Dynatrace session. So, hey, listen, what we're going to do is turn things over to Andre. Folks, as I mentioned before, what makes Get to Know Dynatrace so special is your participation. So, if you have questions, please feel free to type those questions in, to the chat window of whatever you're using. If you're using YouTube, LinkedIn, watching us on something like Reddit, Twitch, whatever it might be, go ahead, ask those questions. And folks, for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand things over to Andre, and he's going to walk through a demo of Dynatrace. So, Andre, take it away, my friend.
Thanks again. Yeah, so first, I think I'm probably just going to introduce myself. As you probably noticed from my accent, I am a French speaker based out of Canada. So, it's a big country and we've got two official languages. And so my apologies in advance if I'm saying weird things or things that don't sound too English. French is my first language. Nobody's perfect. Working on that. Until a month ago, I used to be a software dev, and I'm rediscovering Dynatrace really because I was involved in Dynatrace before, but I'm rediscovering it, and I'm amazed by how much Dynatrace has changed. We went from an APM tool to what I'm calling an AMP tool. We are an application monitoring platform because right now we're not monitoring only application performance. We are monitoring much, much more. We are monitoring logs, we are monitoring security and data coming from different sources. I think it was super cool from you, Jonesy, to show us this with this what we can do with the data coming from flight information and so on. So that is awesome, and I love that. It's really incredible. As a software dev, I love to own my own data and to play and tinker with it. That is amazing. So Dynatrace, well, we are getting data as we just saw from different sources. We can capture data from our one agent, the open pipeline, and so on, and everything's going to go into Grail. So some of you follow this series are probably already familiar with Grail, but Grail is a different data lake. That's your data lake with all of your performance metrics, traces, logs stored in there. And this data lake is going to be used for, it's going to be used by different components in Dynatrace. We're going to have the app engine for techies like myself who love to write apps and do things with that data. You can do that with App Engine, and that is super cool. We have Davis AI. So if you are not a power user, you have a possibility to ask Davis, and this is what you mentioned with Davis Copilot. You can ask Davis to generate queries for you to in a natural way. It's really really awesome. So let's go and take a look first at the notebooks. And to me, notebooks as a dev are really, really cool. So some of you who are familiar with Jupyter notebooks in the Python world are probably going to be familiar with this kind of stuff. Dynatrace has its own version of the notebooks, which allows you to do so many things. My personal favorite is here. We can see what to do in case of a problem with a payment service. So we can have a recipe. Say, for example, we have a problem that is happening in our application. We have this recipe. We can go and check the logs. We can check the problems in Dynatrace and so on. But, and this is something that you just mentioned, we can also ask Davis Copilot. So I've got this query here. I can click on run. And Davis is going to give me a list of all the error logs coming from a specific service. So I'm not quite sure if it was payment dash service, payment service. So that's why I said contains payment. And here I have all of this information displayed right now. That's really nice because, well, we've got this natural language view, but that is under the hood generating these DQLs. So that is really, really great that we have this possibility to investigate things. We don't have to be highly technical. We can just write in natural language what we want to see. Um, so let's go and check the logs. most of the time when I do as a software dev, I start my investigation with the logs, because, well, this is where I extract everything. So right now I'm displaying all the error logs in the past 30 minutes. Let's say that I want to focus a bit more and say that I want to have information coming from, and again, I never remember if there's a dash or not. So I'm just going to type payment like this. And I can have a view of the different log elements that I have. So if I click on these elements, as you can see on the right-hand side, we have the details of this problem. So right now, for example, sorry, we cannot process mere credit cards. Only Visa or MasterCard is accepted. So that's a bit of a bummer. We will take a look at this a bit later. Please note that there are all of these information, all of these details related to to the logs. Let's say that I want to have a bit more context about what happened around this log. So I can go here, click on Show Surrounding Logs, and this is going to give me some information about what happened prior to this error in my logs. I can start to reconstruct well, a flow of what was happening in this one specific transaction. So pretty cool.
Hey, actually, Chris, hold on a second. Let's just take a pause for a moment, and the reason being is we've got some questions that are building up. So
Oh, my apologies.
No, don't apologize. That's the whole point of this. We've got some questions that are popping up. So think about what you want to demo next. But first of all, let's get to some of these questions. I think the first question we wanted to ask here was, can Dynatrace monitor transactional statuses from Lambda functions or AWS Services Cloud? And somebody's working for a bill payments company, right? So, and then we got a different question here. So hold on one second here. Let's go with that. Let's go with that one question that we've got, which is, again, I just mentioned it. Let's just keep on this one. Oh, it was hold on. So let's see here. Sorry, Carrie. Throw up that first question, and then we'll go to the second question that I just talked about. Here we go, folks. We're just going to pop that question back up. And yeah, we're having a little bit of a problem with our Restream platform. No worries, no worries. So let's get back to that question I just talked about. Sorry, and we'll try to get it popped up on the screen so everybody can read it. But it's basically, the question is, can Dynatrace monitor transactional statuses from Lambda functions or AWS services? And so, typically the answer I would say to this is yes. Basically what happens is, when a transaction is being passed back and forth, in the past, we would probably only be looking at information that is, contained within maybe the parameters of the URI or the URL that's being passed back and forth. Maybe the status codes, like 200 was the page delivered correctly, or was there like a 500 error being delivered? Not anymore. That we can do way more than that now. If you can capture those HTTP requests, we can now actually, with the Dynatrace business events, we can parse those payloads. And if there's transactional statuses that are part of those payloads, yeah, absolutely, we can actually capture that now. And you would then be able to have those up on a dashboard. You could, basically track it over time, set up site reliability guardians or SLOs based upon that, trigger workflows off of it. Simple answer to your question is yes, we can absolutely do that right now. All right, looks like we've got another question here. Somebody is talking about the service flow. So choosing the high response time from the distribution trace. But what I am seeing is in the response time and choosing, it's not actually giving the high response time which is chosen, until I choose one more filter from the response filter time. So I I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head. I'm not entirely sure what that be. What's going on with that behavior. You might. My suggestion might be is if that behavior is not if it's not doing what you think it should be doing, I would go to community.dynatrace.com and find one of the forums there and paste that in. Now, for folks that are you're new to Dynatrace, not familiar with what we're talking about, let me give you a moment to sort of explain what the different components of Dynatrace that this person is asking about. Andre, I'm just going to share
Go
my
for
screen
it.
for a quick second.
Absolutely.
So here we go. I am now sharing my screen. So, folks, right now, what we're looking at is the new services view. So, if you've worked with Dynatrace in the past with our Gen 2, or the classic Dynatrace view, we had a services screen. This is the new services screen. So, what we can do is we can actually go into any one of these services, like this one right here. And when I select it, I can see details about this service, right? I can see response time, throughput, endpoints, outgoing services, front end. In this particular case, this service happens to be, an entry point for a transaction. So what we can do here is I can say open with inside of Dynatrace, and then I could say, hey, I want to open this in our service flow map. This was the service flow that this person that was being asked about. This is essentially a sort of a logical view that when I have a transaction or a set of transactions that are coming in from here, then what's happening is it's telling us all of the different downstream logical services that are being touched by these requests. So as these requests come in, these are all of the different services. And you can see that, like a certain amount of response time is taken up in this part of the transaction. If you're trying to understand where your performance bottlenecks are, this is a really good view to have. But you can see that we're going from this service to this authentication service, which then in this particular case goes back and hits a database. Some of these other services, like this one here, is a booking service that hits a credit card validation. Once it hits the credit card validation, it's going back to the database in this particular case. It's one of the ways that you can always with Dynatrace be able to navigate both down a transaction, but when you are at a specific transaction, you can do what's called a service backtrace, and you can actually navigate up the chain as well. And that's a great thing about Dynatrace's understanding of relationships between all of these different entities. One of the things that really sets us apart from all of the other vendors that are out there talking about observability is the way that we map things. We allow you to navigate both down a service and up the service structure very easily. And so in this particular case, the original question was about how is that, how does the filtering here impact what's being seen? And so my advice would be for that person, like I said, go to community.dynatrace.com and maybe grab some screenshots, some examples, and post there. In this particular case, there might be something specific in the way that the filter is being applied. There might be, I'll be honest with you, it might be not working as expected. And if that's the case, we would want to know about it. So please let us know about that. So I'm going to stop sharing. Back to you, Chris. Let's continue on with the demo, and we'll see if some more questions come in.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You bet.
All right. So yeah, as I was saying, right now I've got some context about what logs were happening around this log, but that might not be enough. I might want to get more information about what was happening. So I can have here this open trace, which allows me to see an extended view of what is happening on my system now in this one specific transaction. So here, for example, I see that occurs on the checkout part of my customer journey. I will also see that I have some red markers indicating that there was a problem. And right now, I can see that the problem occurred on the placeholder method. So right here, I have once I click on this entry, I have a lot of data, and again, I can see my sorry, we cannot process mere credit cards. Only Visa or Mastercard is accepted. So there might be some problems with this. The business might want to know how many persons are trying to use this mere credit card, because well, that could potentially be creating a lot of frustration from our users, and that is something that well, the business wants to know about. So the next thing I can do is click here on the service view. And this service view basically gives me information about what is happening at the service level. I can see the failure rate for this transaction. I can see the response time, the different percentiles, so the 99th percentile, the median with the P50, and the P90. So lots and lots of information about this service. So right now I can see, I seem to be having some issues with this with the service, and I can track this. I have different tabs showing me different views, different aspects of the service. So say, for example, right now I can see that this one is running, for example, on Kubernetes. And already from Kubernetes, I can see already in this view that this is running on EKS. The namespace is called prod. The workload is front-end reverse proxy. And as you can probably notice, there is a link that allows me to go directly into this Kubernetes dedicated view. So that is pretty cool. I myself, as a dev, I used to have one tool for the logs. Then I would need to capture the trace ID, write it somewhere, save it so that I could go to my tracing tool and opening it up here. Then I would need to open kubectl to get information about Kubernetes. Here, everything is in the same console, and that is freaking amazing. I love it. So I have a list of all the information about this service. I can see how much CPU is being used, memory parts, how many of them are running, and I have a list of all of my different workloads. And that is really nice, because Dynatrace automatically detected that there are some unhealthy situations with some of my workloads. And then when I click, I can get more information. So for example, this unguard user simulator is experiencing problems. I can see that there is one problem here. It's probably related to CPU. So if I click on one problem, I can see high CPU throttling. And immediately that was discovered by Dynatrace. I didn't really have to configure anything. That came out of the box with Dynatrace. It was taking these events and saying, okay, the measurement, the metrics for the CPU usage is pretty high. So yeah, I'm going to alert about this. So that is really, and I've got, when I click there, I can get even more details about when it started to happen. So that happened an hour and 11 minutes ago, and I can get into more details about this problem. So I like this personally, that's personal preference, but I like to have this Russian nested doll kind of view where I have a quick summary of, well, this service belongs to that namespace, to this cluster. So that kind of already gives me some idea. And again, the same summary of everything that I experienced so far. If I close this window, well, Dynatrace has these tooltips that guide you through what is happening on your service. And say, for example, I can see here that I've got a failure rate increase. If I go to my service to the details here, I can see, well, that this happened, this failure rate increased, had some consequences on different elements. So that is really, really nice. It's giving me a lot of information about what is happening on my system.
And Andre, is it like right now it's saying that in this particular case, of all of the different things that are being monitored, there's like 4 events, 5 SLOs, 90 affected users. There's like 3 different entities, and it's telling you which one of these is the root cause of the issue.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna probably let you talk a bit more about this if you want. It's you're the expert here. You know, I'm a dev. I've got a whiter beard, more worries in life. So so you
Don't get us started on beards around Christmas and white beards. Come on, man. Uh, Andre, no, but you just totally nailed it. Like you basically sat there and you showed visually exactly what's going on with that Davis AI engine. And what it's doing is it's actually parsing through and looking at and understanding the relationships between all of the different affected entities. And it's telling us which ones are the symptoms of the problems and which ones are in fact actually the root cause of the issue. And what I find fascinating about these new views is right there, right now you're on the deployment tab for this, but if you scroll over from that, you've got these events and logs as well. So all of the logs, I don't have to go to a separate tool now to go query my logs to figure out what's going on. It's all here for you. Here's the problem. Here's the root cause. Oh, and by the way, here's all of the logs that are contextually attached to this particular problem. Just great
absolutely.
job showing that, man. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's really nice that the possibility here to drill down into more and more details, to have details about the failures is really awesome. It's a if as a software dev and well, you know, software professional, that is priceless to have this amount of information and this depth of knowledge is amazing, especially as you know we tend to get a lot of contradicting information very often when we are in the war room. We are going to have when problem happens, there's not just one problem happening. We often have lots and lots of, well, a storm of incidents coming in, and we need to prioritize all of this. And Davis is amazing for that. It really helps you figure out where the problem is coming from. So that is really nice. I see that Jan Paul has a question. I will let you.
We have web and mobile channels that facilitate payment processing between customers and billers. Can Dynatrace monitor the response time of transactions to the billers to identify which biller has the longest response time? And then there's some additional context there that didn't show up. So they're using AWS monitor transactions as a possible create one dashboard line graph to visualize the response time for all the billers over time. So I would say yes. Now, typically the way that this shows up in Dynatrace, the biller, if I'm understanding the way the transaction occurs, um, you've got customers that are generating transactions, and as they're generating transactions, requests are going off to these billers, and there's multiples of them, and they are what we would consider to be a third party. So when Dynatrace and Chris showed us this, okay, Chris showed us that view of the services. In those services, there's a category of service which is called request to third party. Dynatrace is smart enough to know that there is an outbound request that's going off to something that is not monitored by Dynatrace. What we can do is we can actually trace how much time that outbound request and that outbound request is it's getting a response, so we can track how much time is happening in that outbound request. So in this particular case, and I've seen this done where somebody has actually gone through that list of those different third party providers, whatever they might be, and they categorize them out and they chart them over time to be able to find out, is one performing better than another. So I would say that, yeah, you can do that type of thing with Dynatrace. Absolutely. That's a great question. I don't know that we've been asked that type of question before, but thank you for asking that. But yeah, definitely request to third parties. It's typically automatically picked up and sorted that way. You can then, as a matter of fact, what I would recommend as a best practice is that once you've identified those outbound requests to the third parties that are meaningful to you, you might want to actually create a set of rules to define them as their own service. And then it gets treated slightly differently within the Dynatrace UI. So that's something that you might want to consider. If you look through our documentation, it'll describe how you can take an outbound third-party request and create a custom service around that. So something to consider. But great question. Thank you. Sorry, Chris. We interrupted with that one. Keep going, man.
No worries, no worries. I was almost done, because well, we tend to see a lot of details, and I love to lose myself in details. But it's nice to still emphasize the fact that with Dynatrace we also have a possibility to create simple dashboards. So here, as you can see, that's an example of one of the dashboards that can be created with green, red indicators indicating that there is a problem. So here, for example, shipment is having some trouble. And if I scroll down, I can see that Nevada seems to be the one experiencing these problems. And even scrolling further down, I can see that the warehouse error is related to a zip code required. So that allows me to get a lot of data out of it. And this is really amazing because, well, I did mention DQL, but these elements are, well, if you look what is under the hood, you see that it's all coming straight from the logs. So we are extracting data from the logs and presenting it in a nice, user-friendly way. And well, of course, you don't have to write this whole thing again. We have Davis Copilot that helps you with DQL, it helps you getting started with it. But well, nothing prevents you to go crazy with this. So have fun as much as you want with Dynatrace. And yeah, I think this was pretty much it for me. I see that we are reaching the end of the
Pretty close
session.
to
So
the end. Andre, Chris, thank you very much for walking us through this demo. I love this dashboard example that you're showing here. That is absolutely fabulous. And the fact of the matter is, all of the different tiles, they can be powered by different DQL queries. We did have a question here. Can you do me a favor and go into the log viewer? So, folks, the question is, someone's asking, so you were saying that if I can have an option to choose info, debug, or error log, which is something that they're getting out of their current tool. This is exactly how you do that in the log viewer. You can literally just bring it down from a checklist here. If you want to filter based upon just the errors, go ahead and do that. And then you click on the run query, and it's going to parse out and just show you there's the errors, just like that. So yeah, absolutely you can do that, folks. It's the way that you interact with the logs in Dynatrace, if you've used just about any other tool out there for logging, it's going to be very similar to that. The difference is the power of this DQL. The fact that I don't have to think about how my data is indexed, that if I come up with a thought, I can go ahead and just do something with the data without having to re-index. It's game changing for so many organizations. We actually, when we rolled this out about a year and a half ago, we had an organization that was using Elastic for logs. And I would say within the first 5 to 15 minutes, everyone that was very comfortable using Elastic were able to be very productive with Dynatrace and this new DQL. It's just a very simple, logical way of being able to organize and parse out that data. It's designed to be human readable. And one of the things that this approach really differs from some of the other tools is it doesn't make heavy reliance on things like regex. Look, I apologize if I've triggered any PTSD out there in the audience. You know, anyone who's used regex at some point in their career know exactly what I'm talking about. You've probably got two screens going. On one screen, you've got what you're trying to query, and on the other screen, you've got a regex editor. And you are now cutting and pasting, trial and error in your regex editor, trying to actually get the filter that you think that's going to do what it is that you're looking to do. So once you eventually find that regex that, you know, does what you're looking for, putting it into production and using it against massive amounts of data also can be problematic, because, to be fair, regex is and can be in certain cases computationally really expensive. It can, you know, it can take a while to parse the data that you're looking to parse in a certain way. For us, this DQL takes advantage of something that on our side, some terminology that we call internally data warping. And so the ability for the DQL to actually be able to parse that information is, it's taking advantage of the massive parallel processing that the cloud allows us to have access to. And so it's a completely unique, different way of being able to query data in a much more human readable fashion. So yeah, exactly. That's how you've done it. That's how people used to do it all the time. But so we paid attention to how people were using regex and how they were querying logs, and we feel that we've come up, and from all the feedback that we have, we've come up with a better way of doing it, and it just makes so much more sense. So, you know what, Chris? Thank you so much for doing this demo. I really appreciate you, you know, coming out here. Fabulous job. Folks on the, you know, who've been listening and watching, great questions as always. You guys never disappoint. Such a great session. I really, really do appreciate all of that feedback, all of the questions. Just absolutely on point. Folks, we're going to wrap it up. We're going to, you know, continue get to know Dynatrace into, you know, into the new year. As I mentioned, you know, one final, shout out for those folks that are thinking about going to Perform 2025. Now's the time to get signed up. And with that, folks, what I'd like to leave you with is, you know, the team here at Dynatrace wishes all of you happy holidays. We know it's a busy time of the year. Please, you know, take the time to, you know, spend it with your family, your loved ones. And we are, you can tell, we're really kind of giddy with all the new stuff that we have coming down the pipe. It's just an exciting time here at Dynatrace. We think you are going to be delighted with the capabilities that we're going to be pushing forward into the new year. And with that, we're going to sign off, and we'll see you next time on Get to Know Dynatrace.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.